Hello and welcome to the Worker Environmental Awareness Training Program for the Italian Bar Road Bridge Replacement Project. This training is provided by Alluvian Biological Consulting. Now this training has four broad objectives. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be familiar with all four of these points. First, we're going to cover the definition and implications of take. Then we'll move on to your responsibilities if you encounter a regulated species. We'll have a brief introduction to the protected species associated with this project, and then we'll go over some general mitigation measures that need to be followed in order to prevent any incidents of take. We'd like to emphasize that this training is meant to supplement, not replace, the training information handouts that you should have received before watching this video. If you have not received a training pamphlet or booklet, please request one from your supervisor or on-site alluvian biologist. Let's start by discussing take. Take is a broadly defined term, and under the Federal Endangered Species Act, take means to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, capture, collect, or attempt to engage in any such conduct. Now, penalties for take will vary from species to species. However, any individual found to be committing unsanctioned take may be dealt hefty fines, and in some cases up to a year in jail time. These penalties are assessed for each instance of unsanctioned take. So what should you do if you encounter a regulated species on the project? The very first thing you should do is ensure that you do not touch or approach the animal. You should then immediately suspend work within the area the animal is found, especially if this work would result in take. Your next step is to notify your supervisor or the on-site biologist. If a biologist is not on site, please contact Gennaro Lockhart at the number listed on this slide and in your training materials. Unless otherwise noted in your materials, a 100-foot no-work buffer will need to be established around the species of concern until it either moves off the project site of its own volition or until permission is received from regulatory agencies to reduce or eliminate the no-work buffer. The next few slides will give you a brief overview of all of the listed and regulated species that occur on this project site. Golden eagle is one of the largest birds in North America. Adults can reach lengths of over 2.5 feet with a 7-foot wingspan. Plumage is almost entirely brown with some gold sheen around the head and neck. They have broad wings and a small head relative to their body size. Golden eagles can be found throughout California. However, population densities are higher in the southern portion of the state. They prefer high elevation, open country with low and scattered vegetation. Nests are large and can be up to 9 feet in diameter and are usually constructed on cliffs or bluffs. However, they may be found in a variety of man-made structures that provide suitable views of the surrounding hunting grounds. Breeding takes place from late January through August. Clutch sizes range from 1 to 3 eggs, and they're incubated for approximately 44 days, and chicks fledge after 65 to 70 days. Bald eagle is a large and fairly distinctive raptor species. With the exception of its white head, the plumage is brown and the feet and beaks of mature birds are yellow. It primarily inhabits old-growth forests adjacent to large water bodies. This species range extends across most of North America, including all of the continental United States. It nests in a wide variety of locations, including trees, cliff faces, cactuses, and mangroves. Nests are among the world's largest for birds, measuring 5 to 6 feet in diameter and 2 to 4 feet tall. Bald eagles form long-term pair bonds that may last until death, but can spend most of the migrating and winter seasons apart. Mating in California takes place from January through July, and females lay clutches of 1 to 3 eggs, incubating for about 35 days. Chicks fledge after 11 to 12 weeks. Ringtail cat is a member of the raccoon family, measuring 24 to 32 inches in length. However, its tail accounts for approximately half of that length. Its fur ranges in color from yellow to brown to black, with a mostly white underside. Ringtail cats bear white rings of fur around their eyes, and 14 to 16 bands of alternating black and white color on their bushy tails. This species is nocturnal and inhabits coniferous forests as well as semi-arid desert and canyons. It uses its exceptional climbing ability to nest high above the ground in rock crevices, cliffs, or tree hollows. Mating occurs in late February, and after a gestation period of 53 days, females give birth to 1 to 5 kits. The mother begins foraging with her brood as they reach 2 months of age. Northwestern pond turtle is a medium-sized turtle. The color ranges anywhere between brown to olive brown to blackish, and the shell is going to be anywhere between 3.5 to 8.5 inches long. The species can be identified from the lines and spots that radiate from the center of the scutes, and the scutes are the bony plates that make up the shell of this animal. Males of this species tend to have a light throat and no markings, and a relatively flat shell, and females are going to have dark markings around their throat and have a noticeably taller shell. The species typically inhabits ponds and creeks and hibernates underwater for several months during the winter. Western pond turtles reach breeding age at about 8 to 10 years of age. Breeding usually takes place in April and May, and what females will do is they'll climb onto land on the water margin and dig a nest. They'll lay a clutch of around 2 to 11 eggs, and those eggs will gestate for about 80 to 100 days before they'll hatch. Roosting bats are protected by California Department of Fish and Wildlife Code 4150, and many of the habitats and structures associated with Caltrans right-of-ways have been found to be inhabited by bats. A total of 18 species of bats have been found to use bridges in California in one way or another. Roosts are places that provide security and protection where bats can rest, sleep, hibernate, mate, socialize, or feed. Roosts can take many forms and may be found in rock crevices, gaps in concrete or steel structures, trees, bridge weep holes, and many others. Bats prefer to roost in places that are in close proximity to their open foraging grounds. In many cases, you won't see bats in their roosts, but you will see traces of guano and bat droppings outside of these roost crevices, so this is something you should look out for on your job site. A variety of bird species have been found nesting in or immediately adjacent to Caltrans right-of-ways. Nest sites are often placed in crevices, cavities, seams, or weep holes within bridges. Other nests are constructed on open vertical cement surfaces on bridges. The species that utilize man-made structures as nest sites tend to be more tolerant of urban conditions, otherwise known as increased noise, light, vibration, and even human presence. But they can nonetheless be sufficiently disturbed during construction or maintenance activities to cause nest abandonment or inattentiveness, which would result in the death or loss of eggs or juveniles. Incubation and brood rearing require approximately 4 to 5 weeks for smaller birds, but can take up to 12 weeks for larger birds like raptors. Any active bird nests found within or adjacent to the project area will require a mandatory 100-foot no-work buffer until it can be confirmed that the chicks have fledged and left the nest. Any raptor nests will require a 500-foot no-work buffer. Now we'll go over some of the key species protection measures for this project. These slides won't comprise an exhaustive list of necessary protective measures, but they should give you a good idea of what's expected of you. There are several general protective measures that need to be followed on this project. I'll go over these quickly, but you should review these measures in your training materials. First of all wildlife should be allowed to leave the job site unharmed. This includes any animals that don't carry state or federal protections. To prevent wildlife entrapment on the project, all excavations, and this includes trenches, holes, and pits, need to be covered at the end of each workday. If covering an excavation is not practical, earthen or wooden escape ramps need to be installed. Additionally, all litter, construction debris, and food-related waste generated on the site needs to be contained in sealed trash containers and removed from the construction area daily. Containing food waste is especially important, as these items tend to attract wildlife, which could ultimately cause project delays. During construction operations, stockpiling of construction materials, portable equipment, vehicles, and supplies needs to be restricted to the designated construction staging areas. The same goes for access roads into and out of the work area. Finally, restrict the disturbance of vegetation outside the work area to the minimum extent possible. In order to protect aquatic wildlife and waters of the state, construction activities need to avoid impacts to nearby aquatic habitat. Vehicles, construction debris of any kind, construction-generated sediment, concrete and cement, litter, and any otherwise hazardous material must be kept out of the San Joaquin River and its tributaries. All of these materials must be properly contained and stored in locations that are not subject to storm flows and are not at risk of being washed into water bodies. We'll finish up here with some important takeaways from this presentation. Perhaps the most important takeaway is remembering what your responsibilities are if you see a regulated species within the project site. Don't touch or approach regulated wildlife and immediately report encounters to your supervisor or the on-site biologist. Keep your training materials somewhere where you can readily access them. If an animal wanders onto the construction site and you're unsure whether it's a cause for concern, your booklets contain the necessary contact information and procedures to follow in order to protect yourself and your company. It is important to remember that you and your company are wholly responsible for following the measures in this training video and its associated training materials, as well as the permits and specifications for this project. So please revisit this video and your training materials as needed. This concludes the Biological Resources Information Program training video. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions about what's been covered in this presentation or your training materials, please direct them to your on-site alluvian biologist.